guys, Loyalty for Life here, bringing you guys a brand new video, and this time around it's the archetype analysis of Qliphort. I know this video is coming out super late. I am very sorry, guys. I've had a lot of issues this week that prevented me from getting this out on time, but I can assure you it's going to be well worth the wait, because Qliphort is probably my most extensively tested deck yet in terms of this like pendulum month thing I'm doing, where I've played this deck a lot more than I did back whenever it was like the hot new thing back in the day. I actually did not get to play the deck much back in the day because it was just so expensive, and I was still in high school if I remember right. God, it's been so long I can't remember if I was or not, but I digress. Qliphort is a really big contentious one because this deck was actually the first meta-relevant pendulum deck, and it's because of that I wanted to talk about it for Pendulum Month. Being the first meta-relevant pendulum deck, you would expect great things from this deck, and unfortunately it doesn't hold up well by modern Yu-Gi-Oh standards. I'd say it's arguably the least well-aged archetype in terms of the pendulum mechanic in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And what's really sucks too, because they have a really good link monster for the archetype. They're one of the few pendulum decks to get an archetypal link monster alongside heavy metal foes, and I honestly think that's the only one that has gotten one now that I think about it. God, I can't think of any other ones. So yeah, pretty much we just got Qli and metal foes that have gotten link monsters in terms of like pendulum decks. If I am missing one, I doubt it. I mean, I know so much about pendulums because I've played all the decks. But I digress. Let's get on with the archetype analysis of Qliphort. First and foremost, what the heck are Qliphorts and how do they play? Well, with the general idea of what pendulums are used for, where they are generally speaking used for being fodder for other types of summons, Konami wanted to, of course, make the first meta-relevant pendulum deck also be focused on the original type of summon, that being tribute summon. Your pendulums are generally speaking meant to be used as tribute fodder. There's two specifically that are like the intended targets for being tributed, but you can use any of them for doing that. They have two boss monsters, one of which is objectively better than the other one, and he even's not too great by today's standards, which is hilarious because the reaction to his reveal was quite spicy amongst the Yu-Gi-Oh community, to say the least. But in that regard, I mean, he's still a good boss monster, just not as imposing as he used to be. They are a weirdly control-focused archetype, and this is where I would say the deck really kind of isn't that great in that they are a control deck that also wants to be an OTK deck. They want to do both. A lot of their stuff is focused on doing OTKs, but a lot of their stuff is also focused on controlling the opponent's board and not letting them do stuff. But they also have a lot of stuff that lets them pick apart your opponent's board, so you're able to do a lot, but however, the deck it has conflicting playstyles. It's weird. It's very weird. We're going to get to that here in a minute. And then most of the monsters can be normal summoned without tributing. This is a really big one. The deck is comprised entirely of high-level monsters, with the exception of the link monster, which of course doesn't have any links, levels. All the monsters are like level 5 or higher. Not a single one of them are level 4. But however, all of the pendulum monsters that are effect monsters can be normal summoned without tributing, and if they do, they become level 4 and 1800 attack. They basically go from having monarch stats to having like Gene Warp Warwolf stats, except, well, 200 less. So that is the general playstyle of Qli. They are a very weird archetype, to say the least. They're also interestingly designed after the Qliphort, I believe is what it's called. It's a thing from like Hebrew or something, I think. And you can kind of see that religious symbolism in a lot of their cards. And also with the other cards in the same series, with how like the Infernoids are inside these things, and the Infernoids are like the devil kind of creatures. It's so cool. I really want to one of these days just create a huge video talking about the DT lore, because it's crazy, and everything involving the Qlis is crazy. These things are basically spaceships that reside within the hollow earth. It's crazy. So, first and foremost, let's talk about the most important card in the archetype, Qliphort Scout. He's a level 5 normal monster, machine pendulum monster, scale 9, 1000 attack, 2800 defense. You cannot special summon monsters except Qli monsters. That's his pendulum effect. That's the very first thing. This effect cannot be negated as well. So this is on every single pendulum monster in the archetype. If you have them in the skills, you cannot special summon monsters except for Qli monsters. This effect, of course, cannot be negated. And this is the biggest reason why this deck is so held back by modern standards. If it wasn't for this deck would be honestly still really good in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! The deck can generate huge amounts of advantage and board presence, but can't do much with it. With the field spell, you're limited to 2 normal summons a turn, which means you're basically just going to be tribute summoning all the time. And, I mean, yeah, it is still good stuff. You can tribute summon, but, however, it's not going to be as impactful as making like a Boral Sword, or making a Boral Load, or making a Saryuja and getting to draw more. You can't do any of that, and there's no way to get around that without destroying your scales. And unless you're playing Wavering Eyes, you're not going to get a lot of advantage on that. And there's no real point to doing either, because there's not an easy way of resetting your skills in this archetype, unlike Dynamis. And I'm already starting to complain, and I haven't even finished reading Scout. I'm sorry, that's my biggest issue with this archetype in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is those first 2 lines of text being on every single Qliphort pendulum monster. And there's no way to get around it. This deck is severely hindered by that. And I get it. Konami was still being very wary of pendulums at the time, and was really trying to be balancing with them, is the big thing. But they a bit overcorrected. I mean, at the time it wasn't bad. Heck, this deck was meta relevant. It was the top dog. Scout was even banned for a time. But however, this overbalancing really holds the deck from being potentially a really great archetype in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Now then, with that being said though, let's finish reading Scout. Once per turn you can pay 800, add a Qli card from your deck to your hand, except for Scout. This is not a hard once per turn. If you destroy Scout after you search, and then put another Scout on your pendulum zone, you can search out a second time, or even a third time if you want to. But there's really no point to doing so, because, well, there's, again, no easy way of resetting your skills. This archetype does not have anything in close to the power of Dynamis Howling. My god, if they got something like that, that'd be amazing. Literally just copy Dynamis Howling and make it Qli focus instead of Dynamist focus, and this deck would be golden. But I digress. Scout is the heart and soul of this deck. Once per turn, just getting to pay 800 life points and search out anything from your archetype is amazing. Monster, spell, trap, whatever you need. You can search out your other skill, you can search out your boss monster, you can search out your field zone. You can search out your equip spell, which is arguably one of the other best cards in the archetype. You can search out your traps, you can search out anything you want, anything you need. There is no reason not to play 3 of this card. It's just that good, and then there's ways to search it out too without even having to use another Scout to search it. Actually, no, you can't search it with Scout, but there's other ways of getting it without having to like use the other searcher in the archetype. So, right off the bat, you play 3 of this. It's a normal monster, which is weird. The deck does have 2 normal monsters. They're very interesting in the flavor text, in that they are both the only cards in the game to use, what is it called again? Computer speak? Like computer reference and stuff, because again, these things are robots and are basically booting up. They're supposed to reset the world, so to speak, kind of like how you reset your computer. Because again, they're resetting the dual terminal. Isn't that cool? I like it. The flavor and like the lore and everything of this archetype. It's so cool. Speaking of their other normal monster, we got Qliphort Monolith. Again, it's a level 5. It has reverse stats of Scout. Well, kinda. Scout has 1,000 attack, 2,800 defense. They're so insignificant, I forgot to mention them. But Monolith has 2,400, 1,000, making him Monarch stats, which is really cool. Scale 1, so obviously the parallel to Scout. And again, it's a normal monster, so no monster effect. But, however, its pendulum effect is where it really shines. You cannot special summon monsters except for Qli monsters. This effect cannot be negated. Once per turn during the end phase, if you tribute summon this turn, you can draw a number of cards equal to the number of Qli monsters you tributed for tribute summons this turn. With the max amount of cards you'll be able to draw, realistically being 6, if you like double normal summon out the boss monsters, but that doesn't happen like ever. So, realistically speaking, you're drawing 2 to 3 cards a turn with this. Sometimes 4, maybe even 5 if you get really lucky. But, however, typically speaking, it's 2 to 3 cards each turn. Now, it is during the end phase, so it's slow. This guy isn't going to be generating you a huge amount of advantage that you're going to be taking advantage of initially. It's more of a slow burn advantage card. It's very, very good for what it does for the archetype, but it's also very outdated because of how slow it is. That means you draw any of your traps, you're not going to be able to use them. But hey, if you draw hand traps, you can use them during your opponent's turn. And that's where it really shines, is that it gives you that ability to get to those hand traps to be able to, well, shut down your opponent during their turn, which is very, very important. Now, because of how slow it is, and because it's not as integral to the archetype as Scout, I have seen some people play 2 of it. Personally, I lean towards more playing 3 of it, because it, along with Scout, make up the backbone of the archetype. They are the ones that you want to have in your pendulum zones the most amount of times. Now, that being said, it's not the worst thing in the world if you do gotta put your other dudes in the pendulum zones, except they all have like the same effects. It's very stupid. This deck did the Dynamist route where like every single monster other than 2 monsters have the exact same effect in the pendulum skills for the most part. That being that, well, all of one skill reduces your opponent's monsters by 300 attack, and all of the other skill increases your monsters by 300 attack. It's very pitiful stat boosting, but however, it's something. So, Monolith, I recommend playing 3 along with 3 Scout, just because they are the backbone of the deck that let you generate the most amount of advantage. Moving on, we got Qliphort Helix. He's got Monarch stats at 2400, 1000, level 6 as well, so straight up a Monarch. It's hilarious. Scale 9, which is awesome. This deck is really focused on having those huge scales, being 1 and 9, as you might have noticed. And that's a big reason why Konami slapped that. You cannot special summon monsters except for Qli's, because they were still very scared of people just being able to pendulum summon out big beefy boys like Blue Eyes for free. Of course, now we can do that nowadays, and nobody cares. So, it really just goes to show how Konami was still being very careful with balancing these cards at the time. It wouldn't be till later when pendulums got truly broken, I would say. But, however, this deck was still pretty good for its time. So, Helix, oh boy. Again, you cannot special summon monsters except for Qli's, and this effect cannot be negated. All monsters your opponent controls lose 300 attack. And of course the skill 1s all boost your monsters by 300, putting a skill difference at 600, well, attack difference at 600. That's not the worst thing in the world, but it's not the greatest thing in the world. Generally speaking, you don't want your dudes in your pendulum zones except for the 2 normal monsters. Now then, Helix is also where we get to the other gimmick of the archetype. You can normal summon these monsters without tributing. If you do, if this card is normal summoned without tributing or special summoned, its level becomes 4 and its original attack becomes 1800. That is on every single one of these Qliphorts. That is all the pendulum monsters that you're going to be summoning all the time mostly. And then if it is normal summoned or set, it is unaffected by activated effects from any monster's original level or rank is lower than this current's level. That is again on every single Qliphort monster that is a pendulum monster that has an effect. So right out the bat, I don't have to read 3/4 of the text on the rest of the cards, because they all have that effect. It's so stupid. But however, really nice for cohesion, and also, again, these things can be kind of scary with how you get to your like level 8s that can't be affected by anything that's level 7 or lower. It's very, very interesting. Does not matter as much nowadays because we got links. Because, well, links don't care. They don't have levels or ranks. They're link monsters. They have ratings. It just goes to show how stuff like this does not age well in Yu-Gi-Oh! That being said, what does age well is Helix's final and unique effect. If it's tributed, you can target a spell trap card on the field and destroy it. That's not once per turn, and it doesn't care how it gets tributed. If this thing gets tributed by a spell or trap card, you get it. If it's tributed for being a tribute summon fodder, you get it. It doesn't care. You get that. You get to pop a spell or trap card. Very, very good. Very, very potent. You play 3 of this card. As well as also his parallel, Carrier, has the exact same stats, scale 1, same pendulum effect, except gains you 300 attack, same everything except for his own unique effect. where if it's tributed, you can target a monster in the field, return it to the hand. I really wish I had destroyed a monster, but getting to bounce a monster is just as good and very, very helpful, especially bouncing back extra deck monsters that your opponent used so much resources to be able to summon. And, well, of course, not being able to monster reborn it back is pretty helpful, because this deck needs that. Carrier and Helix are ultimately your two main tribute fodders. These are the two that you want to tribute all the time, and due to that, you are going to be playing 3 of them for the most part, because you need to tribute them. They are the ones who gain you the most amount of advantage immediately on tribute summon. Yes, Monolith will get you those 2 draws at the end of the turn, but for immediate advantage, Helix and Carrier are your main boys. They take care of monsters and trap cards and spell cards and all that fun stuff. So, these are the 2 main ones. And that's it for the dudes who get effects on being tributed. It really is silly. I really wish Konami would have explored with this a bit more, maybe given us some more level 6s that give us more effects whenever they are tributed, but unfortunately that is it. Moving on to the level 7s and the levels 8s, we got Qliphort Cephalopod, who is a level 7 Earth Machine Pendulum Effect monster, 2800 attack, 1000 defense. Same effect as the other scale 9s, and same effect as every other dude. He has the exact same effects as everybody else. His unique effect is when this card is tribute summoned by tributing a clean monster or monsters, you can activate this effect. If your opponent has more monsters in their graveyard than you do, you gain life points equal to the difference times 300, and if you do, inflict the same amount of damage to your opponent. This thing is pretty cool. I like it. It's not the greatest of the Qli, in fact it's arguably the worst, and due to that I'd only recommend playing 1 if any. But however, the life point gain is really, really helpful, especially since you really aren't supposed to have anybody in your graveyard. This can rack up a huge amount, and even potentially steal games. The biggest thing is, though, that life point gain helps make up for using Scout multiple times. It really does. It helps out a lot, and I wish the deck had more ways to kind of influence the life points to be able to actually be able to get off Scout more often, or recur it and not die next turn. So this thing does help out a lot. I think he's a good one of. He's not the greatest thing in the world, especially compared to the remaining of the non-level 6 Qlis. Oh my god, the remaining ones are really the stars of the show for the most part. Speaking of, let's talk about Qliphort's shell. Same everything, not even going to bother rereading it. Scale 9, level 8 I believe, yes, level 8, Earth Machine Pendulum Effect, 2800 attack, 1000 defense, and if he is normal summoned by attributing a Qli monster or monsters, it can make a second attack during each battle phase, and if it attacks a defense position monster, inflict piercing battle damage to your opponent. Again, double attacking, and with the protection of the Qli monsters where it's unaffected by activated effects from any monsters whose original level or rank is lower than its current level. Very, very, very potent. This thing being a 2800 double attacker with piercing can be scary. That being said, though, it's really only a good 1 to 2 of, because it just gets outclassed by the next 2 that we're going to be talking about. I really kind of just organize these by, well, how good they are. So, yeah, Shell gets outclassed, but he's the main damage dealer, really, of the Pendulum Qlis. Very, very potent in terms of damage it can push out. Moving on to Qliphort Disc. Oh boy, this card. I don't have a lot to say about it, but man, is it good. Same general, well, Qliphort shenanigans with its effects. When it's tribute summoned by using a tributing a Qli monster or monsters, you can special summon 2 Qli monsters from your deck, but destroy them during the end phase. This card is flat out amazing for the archetype. I know I said play 2 to 3 in the little text box over here, but play 3. Play 3. This thing is just flat out stupid for the archetype. Okay, so you pendulum summon 2 dudes, and then you tribute summon this guy, and then you use his effect, and also, of course, so the big thing, you use his effect first, okay, chain link 1, and then you trigger Carrier and Helix, chain link 2 and 3, so then your opponent can't ash you with Disc. And then, so you get to pop a monster, bounce a monster, pop a back row, then you get to summon 2 more dudes, summoning 2 more, I don't know, Helixing Helix and Carrier from your deck, and then you link them off for the Link monster so you can Pendulum Summon big time next turn, and then also get the Pendulum, the Link monster's effect off, which is just flat out amazing. This card is very, 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 very good. I very much recommend playing 3 of it. It's just that good. You want to see it as much as possible. Next up, we got Qliphort Stealth. Ah, boy, this dude stole so many games from me as a kid. so many. Qliphort Stealth is a level 8, 2800, 1000 machine pendulum effect monster. Scale 1, all the standard Qli bullcrap. And when it is tribute summoned by tributing a Qli monster or monsters, you can target 1 card on the field, return it to the hand. Your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to this card's activation. This thing is so stupid. I love it. It's just like, hey, you're not gonna do anything in response to me, and you are not gonna have an issue. And it's just that good. Again, you can chain block with this using Carrier and Helix as chain links 1 and 2, and then Stealth at chain link 3 to prevent your opponent from activating anything in response. Is just flat out annoying. Or heck, even getting to guarantee a sacrifice search, which we'll talk about sacrifice here shortly. This thing is flat out amazing. Again, you're going to be wanting to play probably more so 3 of it. I've seen some people play 2. I don't agree with that necessarily. I do prefer 3 in my experience because it is that good. But however, I can totally get why some people would prefer to play 2 because, you know, you don't want to brick with it. And bricking is a big issue with this deck. I'm going to be 100% honest, it really is. Oh boy. Okay, now we get to the card that collectively caused the Yu-Gi-Oh! Internet to burn for a good minute. Apoqliphort Towers. Okay, now normally I would talk about the next level up, which would be skybase, but Towers is more important, and to understand why skybase is so bad, we have to talk about Towers. Towers is a level 10 Earth Machine effect monster. 3k attack, 2600 defense. Cannot be normal summoned, requires 3 Qli tributes to normal summon or set. If this card is normal summon or set, it is unaffected by spell and trap effects, and by activated monsters from activated effects from any monster whose original level or rank is lower than this card's current level. All special summon monsters lose 500 attack and defense. Once per turn, you can make your opponent send 1 monster from their hand or their side of the field to the graveyard. Their choice. This card single-handedly made the entire Yu-Gi-Oh! Community flip out and say, nope. They did not want to deal with this card. And I do not blame anybody. This card was insanely scary for its time. A beefy monster, unaffected by all spell and trap cards, unaffected by any monster whose original level or rank is lower than 10, so anything ranked 9 or level 9 lower than it, and also makes all your opponent's monsters lose 500 attack and defense. Well, all monsters are special summon, but that doesn't matter for your Qlis, you're just going to be tributing them off right away. And then also on top of that, he can make your opponent send any monster they control once a turn to the graveyard. This thing was terrifying back in the day. Not so much anymore. It really isn't. It's hilarious. When this card was announced, people demanded it get banned before even being released. People were... I think I even remember seeing people say they were going to quit because of it. People did not like this card. People were scared of this card. People thought that this card would ruin the meta, would ruin the game, and then barely anybody played it. I'm not joking. The best Qli builds did not play Towers, and if they did, they played one of it. Because Towers just required so much advantage to summon, and it required so much investment for that really a lot of people saw it as being complete and total overkill. You didn't need it, and the deck really didn't need it at the time. They could just summon a bunch of stuff with disc and go for an OTK. The deck was perfectly capable and reasonable to actually be able to OTK and pick apart boards very easy without towers. Moreover, at the time, skill drain was at 3. This is the deck that got skill drain put to 1, okay? And it stayed there ever since. And skill drain was, I would say, really the biggest reason why Qli did so well at the time for the most part, because they were able to play under it so effectively and just screw over the opponent. And because of that, you could win super easy a lot of the times. Like, it was ridiculous. Towers just didn't see much play. There were builds focused on him called Towers Turbo, but they weren't that effective compared to the meta builds. The meta builds could OTK, or they could draw into skill drain and then screw over the opponent without even having to worry. It was ridiculous with it. Now, that being said, Towers did still get put to 1 eventually, which did nothing, and then they eventually banned him, which again did nothing. But Konami also just really wanted to hit Qli as hard as possible, so they were kind of just taking away all their fun toys to work with. I think even Scout was banned for a good while, if I remember right, but I know Scout's was at 1 for the longest time. So this card, oh boy, if you want to focus on it, I recommend playing no more than 2. It's not as good nowadays, and heck, honestly, nowadays he's almost a joke of a boss monster, because something as simple as just any standard link monster can kill it with little issue, and heck, even decks that aren't using links can still kill it with relatively little issue. It's just not as imposing of a threat as it was back in the day, and it still does require quite an investment to make. They did release cards that make it easier to summon, but however, it's still not the greatest thing in the world. So really, depending on what kind of build for Qli you are going with, you're going to play either 0 or 2, maybe even 1 of it if you really wanted to go with that. So yeah, it's not as necessary. And then we get to Skybase, the absolute disappointment that made everybody laugh at it. Skybase, so Towers was released as a rare, and that shocked everybody. People were like, oh my god, Towers gonna be a super hard to pull secret, yada yada yada. Then they made him a rare, and then they made everything else super hard to pull, so people were kind of like, okay. And then they announced Skybase, and they made it an Ultra for some stupid reason, because this thing is garbage. I'd argue it's the worst of the Qlis. Okay, I can't say that entirely, because really that could go towards Cephalopod, but Cephalopod at least has a use. Skybase, not so much. Skybase is a level 9. 2900 attack, 2500 defense, so a bit weaker than Towers. And it cannot be normal, it cannot be special summon. I don't know, okay, yeah, they do have that on the other. Requires 3 tributes to normal summon or set it. Has to be Qli's, obviously. If this card is normal summon or set, it's unaffected by spell and trap effects and is active, and by activated effects from any monster's original level or rank is lower than this card's current level. Okay, so all so far so good, you know, same stuff as Towers. But then you get to his unique effect. Once per turn, you can target one monster your opponent controls, take control of it till the end phase. Now, this sounds amazing, but you got some issues. First and foremost, it targets. There's a lot of targeting protection in Yu-Gi-Oh! Secondly, you can't really do much with that monster. Okay, you could theoretically tribute it off, but all the Qlis need Qli tributes, you know? So you're not going to be getting their effects at all. You can't use it for a link summon because you're locked into the Qlis. You can't use it for a fusion summon because you're locked into Qlis. You can't use it for a synchro summon because you're locked into Qlis. You can't use it for an XC summon because you're locked into Qlis. All you're going to be doing with the monster you took is to just kind of troll your opponent with it, with maybe using its negation effect or something once a turn, and all that fun stuff. But for the most part, you're not doing much with it. You're going to get to attack, maybe make it go for OTKs a bit easier. But again, like, this is just going to get negated by an Apoqliphort. You know, like, it's just not that great. There's not really much of a reason to play it. It was laughed at back in the day, and it's still not really worth playing nowadays. Towers is still objectively better and is scarier too. Like, I mean, oh my god, your opponent summons a Towers and you're like, holy crap, I gotta kill this thing. Your opponent summons a Skybase and you laugh. It doesn't do anything during your turn. If that steal was a quick effect, we'd be talking, okay? Like, steal your opponent's monster during their turn. you know, troll over their combos, mess up, stuff like that. Then, you know, steal their good stuff during your turn so you can use it for your own benefit. Cool, but it's not a quick effect. It's not. So there's not much of a reason to play Skybase. It's just not good. It is pretty cool though that you can actually fit a towers inside of this thing. It gets crazy when you realize just how big the Qlis are. Or wait, was it Skybase that's inside towers? I don't remember. I gotta look at the trivia again, but like one of these fits in the other, and I don't remember which. And then you look at how high up it is from the Earth, and you're like, wow. Oh boy. So then we get the Link Monster. This card was in one of the Link Frames packs. I don't remember which. I don't really care to. Qliphort Genius is a Link 2, bottom left, bottom right, 1800 attack, 2 machine monsters to make it. Beautiful artwork too. Apparently the actual genius is this little guy in here, and he shows up in several of the Shadal cards. Cool. This Link Summon card is unaffected by spell and trap card effects and their activated effects and the activated effects of other Link monsters. So right out the bat, we're continuing with the Qli trolling of being unaffected by stuff. Cool. Once per turn, you can target one face-up card on each player's field, except this card. Both those cards have their effects negated until the end of this turn. So both of those targets have their effects negated. Pretty cool. Nice. I like that. Very neat. Very good. Why is that not a quick effect? Now, I get what they're kind of trying to go with this, maybe. Where like you can target your scale, like your Qliphort Scout, after you use its effect to search, so then you target that, and then you get to target something else. You don't really care if you negate your Scout because you already searched. That's pretty cool. Doesn't really do much for the archetype, but hey, it's useful once in a blue moon. The biggest thing about this card, though, is its last effect. When 2 monsters are spell summoned at the same time to the zones this card points to, you can add 1 level 5 or higher machine monster from your deck to your hand. So when you Pendulum Summon, and you Pendulum Summon 2 of them to the zones that points to, you get to search out any of your Qlis. This is really good. Like, really good. It's also really good in Dynamis, which is part of the reason why I really want to talk about Qli, but obviously the bigger thing is that this used to be a meta deck once upon a time. So, yeah, this is really good. Really, really, really good. You play 3, mostly because it's the only extra deck monster you're going to be summoning. Which is still the sad part of what this deck can do. The fact that their pendulum skills restrict them so heavily is still the hardest part of this archetype, and why it is so underwhelming in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! It just is not good in most situations nowadays, and it's really sad. I want to see this deck be good again. This used to be a top tier pendulum deck, but it just isn't nowadays. And part of that is the spells and traps. Let's talk about those. First and foremost, let's talk about the best spell and trap that they have, Sacrifice. Arguably to be one of the most broken, like, archetypal equipped spells in the game. Oh boy, equip only to a Qli monster. It gains 300 attack and cannot be stripped by battle. The equipped monster can be treated as 2 tributes for the tribute summon of a Qli monster. If this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can add 1 Qli monster from your deck to your hand. This card has, let's see here, 1, 2, 3 effects, and the third effect's not once per turn. So you could theoretically slap on 3 Sacrifice on a monster, tribute it for a disc, use the disc effect to summon 2 from the deck, Sacrifice effect to search 3 more monsters from your deck. This thing is really, really stupid. The battle protection seems stupid, but it's actually really helpful because Qlis, they don't have very good first turns, tend to speaking, so therefore you kind of need it. You can also, I don't believe it works with towers because it's unaffected by spells and trap cards, so I don't believe it protects us towers. I've heard some people say it does, but I don't believe it does. But however, for the most part, this thing's stupid. Just being able to protect your monsters is nice and all, but the biggest thing is the 2 tribute summon and the effect to search. Being able to count as 1 tribute for your whole tribute for your 2 tribute monsters is really, really, really good. Ask Necros. They get it to be able to count as full tribute for other dudes. This does basically the same thing for Qli. And then also, of course, lets us search. This card is amazing. The 300 attack buff is negligible at best. It's not half bad if you have one of your other skills in the thing, so you also reduce or increase your monster's attack. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but the 300 attack buff just doesn't really do much. The biggest thing is the 2 tribute fodder, and of course also the searching. Very, very good card. You play through this card in the Archetype. Next up we got Laser Clip, Field Spell. Really cool art. Really cool art. Like, just right off the bat. I think it's like supposed to be towers like blowing up a few of the Yang Zing, who I honestly forgot were in the DT lore. Oh god, I gotta revisit Yang Zing one of these days. It's a field spell, obviously. During your main phase, you can normal summon one clean monster in addition to your normal summoner set. You can only get this effect once per turn. Normal summons of Clees cannot be negated. This card's really good. It wasn't heavily played back in the day, at least to my knowledge, from what I remember. At least I don't ever remember any Clee player using it against me, and I know it wasn't very, like, well received for some reason. I don't get why. It's a double normal summon. Personally, I think you should play at least 2. I've seen people play 1. The biggest thing is that it's easily searchable off of Scout, and there's better targets generally speaking. But that double normal summon is flat out amazing for this archetype at times. You don't always have the resources for it, and I think that's the biggest reason why it gets held back, because you just don't have the resources for it all the time, especially nowadays in Master Roll 4, but however, it's still very helpful. Especially the normal summon of the clean monsters cannot be negated part. That is very, very, very good, just preventing your opponent from negating your summons. That is very, very, very integral, and lets you actually keep going with the archetype. Next up, we got the worst card in the deck. I'm just gonna say it. Clipper Launch. I remember pulling this card and reading it and being like, what the heck is the point of this? Until the end of this turn, normal summon set or in set clay monsters currently on the field gain 300 attack, but are unaffected by other spell trap cards. Also, their effects are negated. So, it boosts your monsters by 300 attack, makes them unaffected by other spell and trap cards, and then also makes their effects negated. Now, I get what they're going with this card. It boosts your monster's attack, so 300 right off the bat, that's neat. And then it also makes them unaffected by other spell and trap cards. So like, let's say you're going to activate Dark Hole, you chain this, you get an attack buff, and you also prevent your dudes from getting nuked. And then you also negate their effects, which means your dudes also go up to their original stat line. So like, for instance, if you normal summoned a carrier and he goes down to 1800, you flip over Clipper Launch, he goes up to 21 and then gets his effects negated, so he goes up to 24 plus the 300 from launch, making him 2700, and he's unaffected by spell and trap cards for the turn. It's very, very interesting and is very helpful in very niche situations, but for the most part, this card just doesn't do enough to make it good. It is a neg 1 and doesn't really help you in any way, shape, or form other than just being a general protection card, which it's not particularly great at, like, honestly. Like, you're trading away the protection from monsters for the protection from spells and traps, which in a lot of situations can be very, very good, but in others it's just not particularly great. What I'm trying to say is this card gets outclassed by everything else in the archetype that you'd much rather be searching with Scout. Next up we got Climate Change. Oh boy. Normal trap card. I wonder if I'm going to get one of those little things at the bottom of the video for saying climate change. I just thought about that. YouTube, do it. I dare you. Okay, so it's a normal trap card. Add up to 3 face-up Clee Pendulum monsters from your extra deck to your hand. You can only activate 1 climate change per turn. This card is really, 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 really handy for Clee in the modern era, mainly because you're not always going to be able to pendulum summon heavily from your extra deck thanks to Master Roll 4 rules, so getting 3 dudes back into your hand is really handy. That being said though, this card is also very slow. If this was a spell card, I would definitely be saying play 2, like just right off the bat, but it's very slow as a trap, and in my experience just doesn't tend to be very helpful. Like, surprisingly, like, you read it and like, oh hey, I get 3 dudes back into my hand, I can tribute summon or I can pendulum summon. It's very, very cool. And it is, and I love it, but it's also very slow, and I've ended up cutting it from the deck. I hate it, because it's just like, you don't have enough, like, staying power to keep up with that to where you're going to need it. So, yeah, like, it's just, like, Play 2 if you think you got the room for it, but for the most part, you could probably get away with 1 or 0. So yeah, moving on, we got recreate or recreate. The puns with Cle in the names. So after they hit skill drain to 1, this was their attempt to kind of make a skill drain for the archetype. It's a continuous trap card. If a monster is normal summoned or flip summoned, and is a level 4 or lower monster, negate its effects until the end of this turn. If a monster is special summoned and it is a level 5 or higher monster, negate its effects until the end of this turn, also banish it when it leaves the field. If there is no Cle card on the field except for recreate, send this card to the graveyard. The biggest issue with this card and what it does, okay, so skill drain, while it's out on the field, just flat out negates everything on the field. All monster effects are always negated, always turned off. There is no chain started. Recreate starts a chain, or activates in response to a chain. So like, let's say you're doing against heroes, okay, and your opponent normal summons Stratos, and you already have Recreate out, okay. Stratos effect, chainlink 1 to search. Recreate chainlink effect, chainlink 2 to negate that Stratos effect, okay. Now this is where it's very handy because it'll negate Stratos effect in response and you're good. That being said though, there are times where your opponent can kind of chain block it or mess around with the chain links to where it just doesn't work out as well, or it can miss timing. It's very, very annoying when it happens. And because of that, or even worse, yeah, if your opponent normal summons a monster that does something on summon, or does something in response to it, like, let's say, for instance, they normal summon a monster that says when this card is normal summoned or special summoned, destroy a spell trap card, okay? So they normal summon it. Oh, wait, no. There's a better one. Let's say it has a quick effect where, like, it can chain to a card or effect and negate it, okay? So Recreate activates. That card chains and tries to negate it, and then Recreate's just like, oh, okay, it gets negated because it activates a chain. It's very, very, very annoying. It also doesn't even touch Link monsters or Xyz monsters. It only touches level 5 or level 4 monsters, or, well, level monsters with levels. And the biggest thing is that it really helps you with your Cle things, because, well, your Cle shenanigans, because you pendulum summon out a bunch of level 4s, then, well, because the Cle's come out as level 4s, and then they get their effects negated by Recreate, becoming level 8s or level 6s or level 7s, and then they get their standard stats back. And that's cool. It also can really screw over fusion decks, because that whole, level 5 or higher, get its effects negated and it banishes when it leaves the field. Very, very annoying. Same thing with synchro decks. Very, very annoying, very, very good against certain decks. Helps the deck a lot, especially in a lot of situations, and since monsters with levels are still very integral in the main deck, you do play 3 of this in my personal opinion and preference. Oh boy. Then we got Qliph's End, or Qliph's End. I don't know which way to pronounce it, and I'm scared about the first one because it sounds very, very bad. Normal trap card. I believe this was the most recent support card for the deck, released alongside the Link monster at some point, or sometime beforehand, I don't remember. Came out in Invasion of Vengeance, which obviously was a very, very long time after everything else. Or wait, no. Yes? Invasion of Vengeance, wasn't that the... Wait. I think there was a set with the... Yeah, that was a set with Starving Venom on it. It wasn't that long ago. Darn it. I thought it was a lot, like, long after the other stuff. Oh boy, I am losing my mind. It's a normal trap card. Special summon this card is an effect monster, machine type, Earth, level 4, attack 1800, defense 1000. This thing is basically Qliphort Genius before he gets wrecked. This card is not treated as a trap card. During the turn this card was summoned this way, Cle spell trap cards you control can have prescribed card effects. If summoned this way, this card can be treated as 3 tributes for the tribute summon of an Apoqliphort monster. Very good card, but very slow. I find it to be a very decent 2-of if you do play it. It's a bit gimmicky at 1, and I think it's a bit, bricky at 3. So if you're going to play it at 2, but if you're not, you can totally get away with not playing it at all. Especially if you're not worrying about the Qliphort, like the Apoqliphort stuff, because you don't have to worry about it, because the 3 tribute thing is only for Apoqliphorts. If it counted as full tribute for the tribute summon of a Cle monster, whether it be 2 or 3, it'd be amazing, but no, it only counts as 3 tributes for an Apoqliphort. Oh boy, so moving on to my current list. Well, previously, my current list. I've changed it up a bit since then, but however, to talk about kind of a good idea for how Qlis can go for now, let's look at my old build here. So first and foremost, we got 3 mono with 3 scout. They are the heart and soul deck. I highly recommend playing 3 of each just to be able to get through your stuff. 2 towers, because towers is the boss, and since you're kind of locked into stuff, you generally want to play the boss monster and try to go for game. I'm also just a fan of summoning big beefy boss monsters. That's always been something I personally like. You can easily cut these guys out for another helix and another disc to go for a more streamlined focused build, or heck, even some more hand traps. You could totally do that. Next up, I got 3 stealth. Stealth is arguably the best Qli pendulum monster, just being able to bounce anything, alongside of course carrier and helix. That's 3 spot removal things you can get if you tribute summon him using a carrier and a disc. A carrier and a helix. Then I got 2 shell for just general OTK factor. Same thing with disc. In my most recent build, I did bump them up to 3, so there is that. Very, very debatable if you want to play 2 or 3. I think 3 is like the preferred way in my experience, because it just generates so much advantage. 1 cephalopod for that burn and life point gain. 2 helix, 3 carrier, because carrier is the better one of the 2 in my personal opinion. Being able to bounce any monster. Helix, getting to pop spells and traps is good, but who plays trap cards anymore? In my experience, he just doesn't get to pop as much, which does suck. Then we got 2 Ash, 2 Ogre. You could easily, scram in. No, what's the word I'm thinking of? Cram in. You can easily cram in 2 effect failure or impermanence in this deck, so there is that as well. I'm playing 2 Pot of Avarice and 2 Pot of Extravagance. These cards are just very, very helpful for trying to get through your deck more. Extravagance, I'm always scared to death of using, because I have not had it happen to me yet, but banishing 3 Genius would suck, okay? I'm pretty much just playing all this purely to be able to use Extravagance. 3 good old Summoner's Art. This is what you use to search out your normal monsters. It's not once per turn, so you can search out both if you happen to draw 2. 3 Sacrifice to be able to search out more and get double tribute. 2 Laser Clip for double summons. 2 Recreate because it's good, but not too good. And then 1 Skill Drain, because Skill Drain's still like the best thing this deck has going for it, especially in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! For the extract, the only thing that really matters is good old Qliphort Genius. Everything else doesn't matter as much, because you're never actually going to get to summon it. Stuff down here is stuff that I've cut, most notably 2 Climate Change. I was playing that, but I ended up cutting it for 2 more Pot of Desires, because I was only just playing Extravagance, and I found I just never drew as much, and then I put in Desires to help me out, try and boost up the consistency of this deck, because man, without Scout, this deck has consistency issues. If you can't get to Scout, you can't get your consistency going. Without Scout, you are screwed. So you play 3 Scout, you play everything to get to Scout, and then you hope you get to Scout. If you can't get to Scout, you're dead. You're dead. Then I was testing out 1 Pendulum Paradox along with 1 Duelist Alliance, because I had to search out a Paradox to basically act as a faster climate change. If you don't know what Paradox does, it basically adds any 2 Pendulum monsters with different names but the same skills from your extract to your hand. But however, it's a once per turn, which of course also climate changes as well, but you get to add 3 dudes and it doesn't care as long as you're Qlis. So yeah, for the most part, I kind of just dropped those. You could also try Wavering Eyes. I've been trying it out, but Wavering Eyes is just so hard to play in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Because it's just not as good. The cool thing about Wavering Eyes, though, is that you can destroy your scales after you Pendulum Summon, so you can go for more advanced combo plays. But however, it's so inconsistent, I don't like it. Because you don't have any way of getting the Wavering Eyes until you get your first Wavering Eyes. And even then, you don't get to search out the other Wavering Eyes unless you destroy, 4 if I remember right. So, yeah, I don't recommend playing Wavering Eyes unless you are really, really desperate for the nostalgia days. So, that is it. What are my final thoughts on Qli? Oh, God. The deck is in dire need of new spell and trap cards, first and foremost. Let's just get that out of the way. Most of the spells and traps are antiquated at best. The Sacrifice is their best card still. like without any kind of debate. I do like their field spell. I know I'm in the minority of that, and I don't get why. I don't know why people don't like a double normal summon, but that's just something I mean, I get it. At the same time, I guess I kind of do get it, because you don't always have the resources to do it, but it also is like, it's a double normal summon, people. Other decks should kill to have that. The deck really needs new and better monsters. I would love to see a new boss monster, maybe a third Apoqliphort, you know, something that is like adapted for modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And I'd also really like to see more Qlis that have effects that trigger when they are tributed. Stuff like maybe if like it's tributed, you get to summon a Qli from deck. If it's tributed, you get to banish a card from your opponent's graveyard. If it's tributed, you get to banish a card from your opponent's hand, or send a card from their hand to the graveyard. Stuff like that. That'd be really neat to give the deck more utility. And then also, I would just love to see another Link monster, like a Link 3 that you can make after you summon Genius. You know, or Link 4, because you'd be able to do that. Like, could you imagine if they get a Link 4 that has like 3 downward pointing arrows and 1 pointing right or something, and it just like lets you just go for some big plays? I don't know, just give them something to be able to summon more dudes from their extract. Anything, I beg you. So that is it for Qli. That is my thoughts on it. The deck is a lot of fun in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, but it's not good, especially not compared to Dynamist. Dynamist I was winning like on a routine basis with when I was testing it out, but Qli, like, I have been having a hard time like doing well with it. I don't know if I'm just a bad Yu-Gi-Oh player, that's probably the case to be honest, or if I'm just bad at Qli, but it has been rough for them in modern Yu-Gi-Oh. That restriction to be able to summon, to only be able to summon stuff from Qli, really screws this deck over compared to other Pendulum archetypes. Not a lot of other Pendulum archetypes have restrictions like that. In fact, I can only think of one. And that deck is arguably the worst Pendulum archetype. I don't know if I want to talk about it for Pendulum a month yet. I'm still debating on that because I got 2 others that I am leaning much towards talking about. But if you guys want to hear me talk about Amorphage, I am all for it, okay? I just don't know if anybody would care to hear about Amorphage. But I digress. What do you guys think about this deck? What do you think about Qli and modern Yu-Gi-Oh? What do you think about them from back in the day? Like, my god, I don't know about you, but I think about those days and remember it fondly. And lots of paying 800. I wish I could talk to YgoAmino and ask him to use that pay 800 meme that he uses all the time, because he really does not like Qli, or at least I don't think he does, judging from how often he used that meme back in the day. I digress though. What do you guys think? Thank you for watching. Have a great day. And if it's your birthday, happy birthday. Hope you guys are looking forward to the deck profile and analysis, well, deck profile and combos coming tomorrow. Hopefully, maybe Saturday at the worst. Things have been very rough for me this week, to say the least. So guys, thank you for watching. Peace out and have a great day. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please do consider rating, commenting, and subscribing. Sharing the video helps as well. If you especially really like it, please do consider being a channel member. Every little bit helps out. And hey, also why not check me out on my other social media pages. Thank you and have a great day.